Welcome to KBA Vendor Viewpoint. This is Selena Parrish, KBA Director of Membership Products and Services. Today we are featuring KBA endorsed SHAZAM. We are so pleased to have with us today SHAYDE LEBLANC, Senior Vice President, Core and Ancillary Products, and Tom Miller, Senior Vice President of Processing Solutions. Thank you both for being with us today. I'm going to just turn it over to Shade and Tom. Will you give the audience some of your background and what your role is there at SHAZAM?
Yeah, thank you so much, Selena. This is Tom Miller. And as Selena mentioned, I am the Senior Vice President over our Processing Solutions. I actually began my career, probably like many of you, in the banking world. I started back in the mid-'80s. I worked for a couple banks. I'm originally from the St. Louis area, and had worked for Boatman's Bank and Mercantile Bank. Both of those have since been acquired, but spent some time on the lending and the retail side of the world. Transitioned into selling checks into the industry in the early 90s, and I've actually been with SHAZAM since 1993. So quite a long time,
That's
about 31. Yeah. So my current role, I've with SHAZAM, I've sold EFT services to banks throughout the country. I've led various sales teams, worked with fintechs, and actually even worked for a little while with merchants in our acquiring side. And my current role as Senior VP of Processing, I get the privilege of working with our sales teams, with marketing on different campaigns. So really kind of managing the business unit of the EFT processing side of our business, which is kind of our founding area, and that's one of our largest areas. And I'll pass it over to Shade and let him tell a little bit about himself.
Thank you, Tom.
Yes, thank you, Tom. Thank you, Selena. My name is SHAYDE LEBLANC, as Selena mentioned, Senior Vice President of Core and Ancillary Services, really a counterpart to Tom Miller on the core side of the business. So we'll do a lot of the same things and the same functions, just with the core and digital and document management versus the EFT processing side of the house. A little bit about my background. So I do think it's important for the audience to know exactly who they're listening to. Like Tom, I started my career in banking in the early 2000s, just a little bit later than Tom.
You didn't have to mention that part.
But I live in South Louisiana, born and raised, and served the community bank in this area for a number of years. And if you folks will recall, back in those days, we started out in bookkeeping and worked the teller line, and then went to new account services, then loan administration and the banking schools and things of that nature, to get a full understanding of the banking world, how the bank makes money, and how the bank operates. And those were invaluable experiences that I take with me every single day. So I do think it's important to share our banking background so that when we're talking to customers, they know they're talking to someone who understands their plights, what they're dealing with on a daily basis, and then how to service the customers. And so fast forward a number of years, like I said, serving as a Senior Vice President over the core side of the business, and just, again, dealing with the business units, the sales teams, legal, and all the other areas as we get into contracting and negotiations and things of that nature.
Wonderful. And I know on the EFT and the core side, SHAZAM provides a lot of support and services to the KBA member banks. And I know the banks that you have in Kentucky as client banks always have wonderful things to say about the customer service that you provide. Can you expand on all the different layers of support that you're offering on EFT and core?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for saying that, Selena. I appreciate that. You know, at the core of what we do, and really, if there's one takeaway that I'd love everyone who's listening to this to really kind of digest, is that we are very unique. And at its core, SHAZAM is member-owned and we're nonprofit. So member-owned meaning that you, the member bank, the owner bank of the network, and the processing side of our business, you are essentially my boss, Shade's boss, all over 600 employees at SHAZAM. Our mission in life is to provide the highest level of customer service and quality products at the lowest possible price without compromising the quality of those things and also the security of our organization. And as you know, security with all the cyber attacks and everything else is a huge, huge piece of it. So we take a lot of pride in customer service. That's a differentiator for us. I know every organization brags about, oh, we have the best customer service. We have the stats to back those up. We measure things such as, how many times does the phone ring before someone picks it up? And on a given day, that might be 2.3 rings. How long does it take for us to respond back if we're not able to pick that up right away? So we measure all of those things on a daily basis, and we take that service level very, very serious. The other piece I'll mention and hand it over to Shade is that we are totally domestically based in the U.S. So all of our client-facing teams on a 24/7 basis is all based out of our corporate office in Des Moines, Iowa. So we don't ship any of that overseas. Whether it's at 2 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you will always be speaking with someone at our corporate office. And with that, I'll hand it over to Shade.
Thank you, Tom. I agree 100% with everything Tom just shared. Again, all U.S.-based support is very important. I'll take a little bit different approach in my response to your question, Selena. Just like many of the folks that we serve, we compete in the marketplace with larger providers who may have a few more resources in certain areas. But where they can't compete with us is our service. It's our customer service that differentiates us in the marketplace, much like our community banks. As Tom said, all U.S.-based support, 24/7, 365. The one thing I'd like to share in addition to that is majority of our support members are former bankers. For one reason or another, a lot of them have come from their banks being acquired, and they were looking to do something different. We'd take full advantage of that situation and pick up an invaluable resource that knows our business. And so a lot of them are ex-bankers. In fact, a lot of them are cashier level or higher from the banks. And what that does is gives us a great level of experience with our support team. As former leaders in their banks, they truly understand the issues the banks are facing. They can empathize with the ramifications at a management level, which is very, very important, as you know. They know, when you have a customer in the lobby or in your office, you can't wait for an automated service to get back to you and call you 3 hours later or a day later. You need a response right now, right here, to take care of your customer and provide the level of service they're accustomed to. We take a great deal of pride in offering that service. Our customers have come to learn how we operate. They've come to appreciate it. And frankly, they've come to depend upon it. And I really believe that's our differentiating factor.
Thank you. That is great information. And I know our KBA members greatly appreciate all that customer support you're providing. And do you have recommendations for KBA members who may not currently be partnered with SHAZAM? Do you have just recommendations on how they get started to talk with you about EFT and core?
Yeah, I think that really the first thing that they're probably going to want to look at is, as with any type of situation, as your contracts come up, you're probably going to want to take the time to do some due diligence. So I would strongly recommend that you stay on top of your contract situation, and it's very important, especially in today's world, from an EFT processing standpoint, from which networks you're using, whether that's your global networks such as MasterCard and Visa, or what we call the unaffiliated networks such as SHAZAM, Star or Pulse or some others. But and then of course where Shade represents your core contracts, your digital contracts if they're with another organization. So you're going to want to stay on top of those. And as those come up, we highly recommend that you begin your due diligence. And if you're not already doing business with SHAZAM, we would obviously love the opportunity to talk to you. Really at the end of the day, what do you have to lose? I mean, even if you're not super interested in perhaps making a change, I think the proposal and the pricing that we would provide is at a minimum is going to provide some really good leverage to potentially negotiate, with the incumbent. But I would recommend starting that process no later than 24 months out, because you're going to want to be patient. It'll take a little while to get information from the incumbent. It's going to take a little while for us to gather the information and provide a proposal. Maybe there's demos involved. So just to be able to take your time and not feel rushed, I would recommend to start that process about 24 months out.
Yeah, and if I may chime in and piggyback on Tom's comment, I agree wholeheartedly. In addition to that, I would certainly take a look at your agreements that you have in place today and ensure they're coterminous. What we see in the marketplace quite often is agreements between EFT, core, digital, document management, you name it. And many times they're not coterminous. And so the customer has to all of a sudden wear their attorney hat and try to figure out, when does my relationship with this existing provider actually end? And so I would also encourage you, as you're looking through those agreements, to ensure that if you've added any products after you signed your original master agreement, that you didn't change the terms of your master agreement. We have seen that in the marketplace quite a bit, where adding a teller product or an account origination system might alter your master agreement terms. And so we really and strongly believe in advising our prospects and customers. If you want us to take a look, we're happy to take a look at and offer any suggestions that we have to ensure you truly understand when your agreements became effective and when they come to an expiry.
That's great information. And when you talk about EFT, and I don't know if there's a different time frame for EFT and core, I normally think that it takes longer for banks to get converted over to core. But how long would it take a bank to get up and running with SHAZAM once they decide to partner with you? Is there a difference on the EFT side and the core side for how a bank gets up and running with SHAZAM?
Yeah, great question, Selena. There is actually a different time frame. So I'll start on the EFT, the processing, and the network side. We recommend at least 6 months, kind of from start to finish. So from the time that you would complete the contracts and the operational paperwork, from the time that you would potentially make that transition from your current provider over to SHAZAM, we like to have 6 months if you're looking at EFT and or the network. And we do that just so that we can take our time. There's external partners such as Visa, MasterCard that we're going to have to work with. You might have ATMs involved, and there's ATM hardware and software that we'll have to work cohesively with those providers, and just assembling a detailed transition plan. And that involves training, just getting your team on board. There's going to be a little difference in reporting, for example. And then at the end of the day, our biggest objective is to have the least impact on your customers with that. So in my world, the EFT processing, the answer is 6 months, and I'll hand it over to SHAYDE, because I know in the core world, it is a little bit different.
Thank you. That's great.
Yeah. Thank you, Tom. Selena. Agreed. On the core side, the core is really the hub accounting system of the entire bank, and you have all these different ancillary products that are plugging into the core hub. And so just from a coordination standpoint, project management, there's a lot of moving parts, so it does take a little longer. So on average, I would tell you that 8 to 12 months is an ideal scenario. We have done conversions quicker than that, from the time agreements are signed to the time they're implemented. Best practice, though, Selena, I would say 8 months at a minimum, ideally 8 to 12 months out, to allow, to Tom's point, you have third parties involved. And so if you're working with our data center, you have AT&T or Verizon, you have communications channels, and these large providers, we have to give plenty of lead time to get things set up, proper testing, and so on and so forth. So it does take quite a bit of time, but I would say on average, 8 to 12 months would be best practice to ensure that we have a smooth conversion and a transition for their employees.
Yeah, there does seem to be a lot of moving parts when you start talking about going through a core conversion. I know the KBA members always seem to, I guess, have surprises along the way. And so anything we can do to make it as seamless as possible would be the goal I'm sure SHAZAM would have for our banks. And with all the work you're doing for community banks, do you have strategies for banks to use when they make that decision to implement solutions that SHAZAM provides?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think really at the end of the day, we are about flexibility and choice. So we have a full suite of products. So I'll speak first from the EFT, the processing and the network side. We offer really everything that you would need to have a successful program. However, if you have, for example, someone that you really, really want to work with in another specific area, like digital, for example, then we will do everything possible. If we don't already have a full, complete integration with that partner, then as long as they're willing to work with us, then we're happy to dive in. We have a full integration team that's fully staffed, that their whole job, their mission in life is to make sure we bolt up and we offer the best solution with that given partner. So really, SHAZAM, since its beginnings back in 1976, we've always just wanted to provide that high level of service and give that choice and flexibility to those individual banks. At the end of the day, and I really can't stress this enough, but our mission really, especially in the EFT and the network side, is to try to provide the highest level of net interchange. When you look at kind of the pressures that community banks are experiencing today from a regulatory standpoint, being limited, looking at controlling of overdraft fees, for example, typically the interchange that you make off of your debit card programs is typically in the top 3 non-interest income producers for a bank, if not number 1. So how much time are you spending really taking a look at that net interchange? What SHAZAM tries to do is really maximize the amount of interchange revenue from a growth standpoint. And so that's where the SHAZAM network comes into play. So every time your cardholder uses their debit card at a particular merchant, our goal is to try to collect and generate as much revenue as possible. And then at the same time, our switch fees are the lowest in the industry. So like in any given business, right, especially in this world, in the banking world, we're trying to maximize that revenue and we're trying to minimize the expense, thus providing you the highest net income from that interchange standpoint.
Thank you for that. And as you talk about debit card interchange fees, that's one area where KBA is extremely concerned about the Federal Reserve's proposed changes with regards to reducing debit card interchange fees. So with all the focus that SHAZAM has, can you tell our audience about the support that SHAZAM's giving the banking industry and everything that's going on from the regulatory side that maybe SHAZAM is doing that our member banks are not even aware of?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, and I'm glad you asked that question, Celine, because this is, and it can be kind of a scary part for community banks. And I would highly encourage, any type of periodical information that the KBA is sending out, or any of the organizations or maybe magazines that you're seeing, either paper or electronic, is you really want to stay on top of different articles and different occurrences that are happening in the industry. So we all are familiar, obviously, with the Durbin Amendment back in 2010 that went live in 2011 that limits interchange for those institutions 10 billion and above. But there's also components with requiring, double, at least 2 unaffiliated networks. There's now some different bills looking to be passed, and Senator Durbin from Illinois is looking at reducing those fees even more. There's other restrictions and pieces of that. So it's always a moving part. Just to mention a couple others that SHAZAM is keeping an eye on. We actually have a full-time lobbyist. Some of you may have met him. His name is Dan Kramer, and he lives in Iowa, but I will tell you that he spends more of his time in DC, and he actually meets with people like, Senator Durbin and others in Congress to always keep an eye on what's going to happen that potentially is going to impact this banking industry. So SHAZAM takes that very seriously. We're always monitoring what's going on. Just to give you a couple examples, right now, Capital One, for over $30 billion, is trying to purchase the Discover brand and repurpose all of those Capital One cards over to Discover. That will make them, with the existing Discover cards, the largest issuer in the country. And then they now have their own network in Discover, and in the debit world, Discover owns Pulse. So now they now have a gateway into that piece of it. There's a lawsuit proposed settlement between MasterCard and Visa, again, over $30 billion. And some of that limits the amount of interchange that banks are going to make on their credit card side. And our concern from a SHAZAM standpoint is that going to trickle over into the debit world. It also gives the ability for individual merchants to create deals with individual issuers. So imagine, if you will, a Capital One, for example, or a Wells Fargo or Bank of America cutting a deal with Walmart or some other merchant, any other merchant, where they recommend that, hey, if you use this particular card, not a community bank card through the KBA in Kentucky, but if they use this other card, then they would incentivize that particular customer with a discount or some type of a lower rate or something for that particular card. So those are things that are kind of scary that we are always keeping an eye on and making sure that we're educating the industry out there of what's potentially the dangers and what potentially could happen.
Certainly. Thank you so much. And as we're hearing all the great things about what SHAZAM is doing for community banking, do you have suggestions on the best way for our audience today to get in contact with either of you? Do you want them to contact you direct, or is there a specific area of SHAZAM where they can call to get more information about signing on or starting the conversation?
Yeah, I would just say, honestly, the easiest way is just contact your assigned KBA representative. As an endorsed partner of KBA, which we truly appreciate, any of them would be able to reach out. If you'd like to talk to either myself or SHAYDE directly, my email address is very simple. It's just tmiller@shazam.net. And you can email me directly, and I'd be happy to either answer your questions or point you in the right direction if I myself don't know the answer.
Thank you. That's great to know. I know we often see SHAZAM at our events. We just had spring conference, and SHAZAM had a booth, and your staff's always there to network and communicate with our community banks, and we always hear great things about SHAZAM. We greatly appreciate the support that SHAZAM gives to the banking industry and KBA here in Kentucky. Several of the banks that I have visited with talk about the EFT side and the core side and all the great things that you're doing to support them and make life a little easier for them. And I think that's where many times with the regulations and everything in the industry, the bankers don't get a break. It doesn't seem. There's always something coming out from Washington that's creating some more heartburn. But your all's guidance and the support that you're giving on the Durbin Amendment in Washington with Dan Kramer there, that is definitely, I've often said we can never have too many friends in Washington, D.C. to kind of be cheerleaders for the community banking industry.
Yeah, and that's right. That's right.
We thank you so much for taking your time to be with us today, to do a podcast with us. And For additional information about SHAZAM, you can go to KBA's website at kybanks.com. And that's all for this episode of Vendor Viewpoint. Until next time, this podcast is a wrap. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Shade. We greatly appreciate you with us today. Thank you.
Our pleasure.
Have a great day.